All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT exam practice question series. Where we're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and, of course, subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our stated materials, including our combo pack. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Martin always keeps 2 or 3 presents for after Christmas. He uses these presents as incentives for when his kids need to go back to school after the holiday. He tells his kids they can each open a present for each week that they behave in school following the holiday. What is Martin using? So we're looking at Martin and the type of intervention or strategy that he is using. So what do we know so far about Martin? Well, he has presents for after Christmas, and these presents work as incentives. So whenever you see incentives, start thinking about contingencies, start thinking about reinforcement. When we talk about incentives in ABA, we're typically talking about setting up contingencies. How do we set up contingencies? Well, we say, if you engage in this response, then you get this incentive. And those incentives are incentivizing engaging in their response. So his incentives are used to get his kids to go back to school after the holiday. The contingency is they can each open a present for each week that they behave in school following the holiday. So if they behave in school, then they can open a present. So what strategy is reflected here? A, the Premack principle. What does the Premack principle say? It says that you are using the opportunity to engage in a highly preferred response or activity as reinforcement for engaging in a lower preferred response. That's exactly what Martin is doing here. The highly preferred activity is opening the present if they do what? If they behave in school. Now, what about B? Because we never stop at one answer. We read every single answer. B, high P request sequences. Is Martin using a high probability request sequence? Is he delivering a lot of high probability requests followed by a low probability request? Well, no, he's just simply setting up this contingency where his kids can open the present for behaving. Now, C, bribery. Why is this not bribery? Well, bribery comes or occurs when you provide the incentive or reinforcer before the behavior happens. So if Martin were to give his kids a present before they went to school, and then he tells them after they open the present to behave, that's a bribe. A contingency is when that's reversed. Whenever you are using the reinforcer following the response. And that's how we have to do it in ABA. The response always needs to occur in order for the learner to gain the incentive. That's the difference between the bribe and the contingency. Martin's using a contingency here. He's not using a bribe. And then D, prompting. Is Martin prompting anything out? No, there's no visible prompts here. There's no notable prompts here. All we know is this contingency has been established. If you go to school and behave, each week you go to school and behave, you can open a present. If you behave, you get a present. Martin is using A, the Premack principle. A behavior analyst tells a parent that the target behavior is keeping hands to oneself. The behavior analyst asks the parent to take frequency data on this behavior to help develop a plan for this behavior. The parent asks how she should respond to the behavior, and the analyst tells her to not do anything different than she is currently doing and to just worry about taking the data. What type of data is likely being taken? When we talk about data, there's a few different types. We can have baseline data, we can have intervention data, and then we can have, let's say, maintenance data. Baseline data occurs before the intervention begins. Intervention data, of course, is data on the intervention. Maintenance data occurs after the intervention is over. In this case, what do we know? Well, we know the behavior analyst is telling the parent the target behavior, and then they ask the parent to take frequency data to help develop a plan. Now, right there is a pretty clear giveaway about what type of data we're taking. Because if we haven't developed a plan yet, it means we haven't started the plan yet, and the plan isn't being implemented. So what kind of data can help shape our plan? Well, baseline data. And how does baseline data help shape our plan? Well, baseline data will give us an idea of where the behavior is currently at. So this is why the analyst, when the parent asked how she should respond to the behavior, the analyst tells her to not do anything. Because during baseline, we don't want to change anything. Baseline is the idea behind baseline is to gather data in the most natural environment possible. Once we get baseline data, once we've established where the behavior is currently at, then we can intervene and start taking intervention data. So a few different things here gave us this answer. One, the data is going to help develop a plan. So if we're still developing and we haven't intervened yet, we're still in baseline. Two, the analyst told her to not do anything. If we are not intervening, then you're more than likely still in baseline. So what type of data is being taken? Well, A, baseline. We discussed why it's not B, intervention, because we're still developing the plan. We're not intervening yet. We're not doing anything yet. And then maintenance is going to follow intervention. We haven't even started intervention. Therefore, we can't have maintenance data quite yet on this behavior. So what type of data is likely being taken? Well, A, baseline. Your client's behavior plan indicates that extinction should be used anytime the client starts to scream to obtain a tangible. You notice that the client's parents rarely put this behavior on extinction while you're at the house. What should you do as the behavior technician? So put yourself in the shoes of this behavior technician. What is occurring? Well, the behavior plan says extinction should be used. And whenever we're using extinction, extinction needs to happen 100% of the time, or as close to 100% of the time as possible in order to truly be effective. However, you see that the client's parents aren't putting this behavior on extinction, or are rarely putting this behavior on extinction. That's a problem. One, they're not following the plan. And in ABA, we collaborate. It's a team effort. We need the parents' involvement to get the best results. Two, if you're using extinction and they're not, they're actually hurting your intervention. They can possibly be making the behavior worse. So this is obviously an issue. As the behavior technician, you see this. What do you do? What is your role here? A, reteach the behavior plan to the client's parents. Should you take it upon yourselves to provide parent training? No. You, as the technician, should never independently conduct parent training without prior permission. So your first instinct here should not be to reteach this plan without permission. What you need to do is B, reach out to your supervisor as soon as possible. Remember, your job as the behavior technician is implementation and data collection. Those are your two primary roles. When you extend those roles, you're going to need permission from your supervisor. And when you notice something is off, the first thing you do is communicate with that supervisor. What about C? Ask the parents why they are not using extinction when the client screams. This is not really your place either. You don't know what the supervisor might have told them. You don't know what the situation is, and it's not your place to ask that question unless you do B first. If you reach out to your supervisor and they tell you to ask that question, then go ahead. And then D, stop extinction until the parents start using extinction as well. Definitely not right. You are following the behavior plan as you were trained, and you only alter how you're implementing the behavior plan if given direction from the supervisor. So what this question is really testing you on is, do you understand that the BACB and the ethical code and the task list emphasize communication? Communication with your supervisor is crucial to good service. You're also working within your competence here and your defined role as the behavior technician. So you need to reach out to your supervisor as soon as possible. Larry wants his son to start following instructions the first time the instructions are given. When Larry has to repeat directions to his son, Larry takes away 5 minutes of PlayStation time from his son, but Larry's son still won't follow instructions the first time given. Taking 5 minutes away currently functions as a what? Now, this is kind of a trick question, just to use it as a teaching moment and to make sure you're understanding what's occurring. So we know right now the question is about the 5 minutes, and Larry is removing the 5 minutes. Now, immediately when we see that, we want to think, all right, this is some sort of punishment procedure, and even possibly a response cost procedure. However, we have more data, more give or take, or we have more information on what happens following the 5 minutes. Because remember, with the consequence, we're always looking at future behavior. How is future behavior changing? And Larry wants his son to follow instructions. That's our behavior. Whenever he has to repeat directions, that's when he takes away the 5 minutes. However, Larry's son still won't follow instructions. So despite the consequence of taking away the 5 minutes, Larry's son behavior hasn't changed at all. And so if a consequence isn't changing the behavior, we don't know if it's a reinforcer or a punisher. So we have A and B, which are negative reinforcers and negative punishers. And yes, we're taking something away. So it does appear to be a negative consequence. But we don't know how it's changing the behavior. His behavior hasn't changed at all. He just still isn't following instructions. It doesn't say it's gotten worse. It doesn't say it's gotten better. It just hasn't changed. So when that behavior is not changing or even maintaining, we don't know what the consequence is. It definitely can't be C because we're taking something away. It's not positive. Therefore, taking 5 minutes currently functions strictly as a consequence. Now, this is a bit of a trick question, but it's a teaching question, reminding you to always look at future behavior. Keep in mind, if the question had simply said, when Larry has to repeat directions to his son, Larry takes away 5 minutes of PlayStation time from his son, and stopped there, then we could have said it's negative punishment because when you remove reinforcement contingent on behavior, or earned reinforcement contingent on behavior, it's a response cost procedure. But since we do know that the behavior is not changing in the future, then we can't safely say it's either reinforcement or punishment. The whole idea here is consequences affect future behavior. You're looking at future behavior to determine what type of consequence is being used and how you can label that consequence. Branson engages in severe tantrums several times a day. These tantrums typically last an extended period of time, but there is no clear beginning or end to the tantrums. What type of measurement should you likely avoid given this information? What information do we have and what are we asking? Well, we want to know what type of measurement we're going to avoid. And so what is the information? Well, Branson engages in tantrums a lot, right? Several times a day. They last an extended period of time. Importantly, though, no clear beginning or end, meaning they're not very discrete. So if we look at a frequency, frequency is what? Frequency is a count. And in order to count something, it needs to be discrete. It needs to be a clear beginning and a clear end. If these tantrums, and if you've ever seen or experienced a tantrum, you can see that it's never really clear typically when they end, right? Because they can reduce it, they can decrease in magnitude, and they can increase again in magnitude. So it's very difficult to pick a clear beginning and an end. So how can you accurately count something without a clear beginning and end? Well, you can't. And so when there's no clear beginning or end, you really shouldn't use frequency. Given that, if we're not using frequency, then we can't use rate. And why is that? Well, rate has frequency as a component. Rate is just frequency over time. If we're not taking frequency, then we can't calculate rate. Could you use duration? Sure. The tantrums last an extended period of time. And it's not as dependent on the clear beginning or end because you're taking that long period of time. Would you prefer a clear beginning or end with duration? Absolutely, for sure. But since frequency and rate are certainly out, then duration, given it's an extended period of time, might be the better option. And given the answer choices, our best answer is going to be D, both A and B, because frequency and rate are out of the question. No clear beginning or end, you can't count how many times it's occurring. Finally, examine the following diagram. The dashed lines in between R2 and R3 represent what? So we're looking at, not really dashed, but we're looking at this line here. So the lines in between R2 and R3. And I love this diagram because it really highlights what is latency and what is inter-response time. So what is latency? Well, latency is the time in between the SD and the first response. So our latency is right here, this line here. This is latency. Once we're past latency and we just have response 1 to response 2, response 2 to response 3, now we're simply looking at inter-response time. So if we're looking at R2 and R3, which is right here, we're looking at the inter-response time between R2 and R3. Think of this diagram whenever you're working on latency and inter-response time, and just replace your SD and response with something real, such as SD, take a bite of food. Response 1 is client takes a bite. That's our latency. And then when we have take a bite 1, take a bite 2, that's our inter-response time. So the dashed lines in between R2 and R3 right here represent into response time. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Please let us know when you pass so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Subscribe if you haven't already. As always, work hard, study hard, and we will see you soon.